Alright guys, welcome back to CBTV Idaho. My name is Tyson and I'm your local videographer and journalist for Construction Business TV in the East Idaho area, and we are covering episode 3, I believe it is, right? Episode 3 of the Idaho Falls Auditorium series on CBTV Idaho, and we had kind of hinted in our last episode. I'll leave a link to that episode in the screen right in the corner. In our conversation, we started talking about, you know what, we're starting to see a lot of progress out here. It would be awesome to actually do one of these episodes on set, on site, I should say. Come out here and actually take a look at what's being done with Rob Spear, Executive Director of the Idaho Falls Auditorium District. How are we today?
Tyson, I'm great. A little windy out here, but glad to be with you today and excited to talk about the tilt-up process and the various sequences involved in that.
It is a little bit on the nippy side today, and for the locals watching, we went through a little bit of a freak early snowstorm earlier in the week. I imagine that probably may have understandably thrown a little bit of a wrench in your processes out here.
Well, it's one thing we know we can't control in this project is the weather, and unfortunately we had a little bad weather the last week, but the guys have done a good job. They've overcome that, and I think we're going to be just fine as we move forward.
I imagine doing this line of work, you kind of get used to expecting the unexpected.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come out here and walk through some of the processes that we're doing out here. We're very close to starting to see some of these walls coming up. You said that you've been particularly excited for that.
Well, it is. It's been a lot of work has been done since we broke ground in May. And I know people that drive by the site, maybe it looks like not spent a lot has been done, but a lot has been done. And really what's been done is all these walls have been formed on the ground. So as we talk about the sequencing here, if you don't mind, Tyson, we'll just jump right into the sequencing. And you can see the first step of a tilt-up wall panel process is this, what we show here is called this rat slab.
I think what I'll do real quick is I'll give the microphone to you so that you can talk, and then I'll control the camera.
Okay, awesome. So the first step in a tilt-up process is to pour what you can see here is a rat slab. It is simply a concrete slab. Its sole intention is to be the base of these walls. And so this project, that right there, that is called a rat slab. And you can see this is a first step. You can see each one of these sections here is a wall. There's 107 walls as part of this project. And the first step of the wall process is to take brick liner, which you can see here. You can see the white brick liner. The brick liner is then prepared and set down. That is that. And then the brick liner is laid face down. A lot of quality control to make sure it's in the right place. And then a thin brick, you can see a thin brick in my hand here, is actually snapped into the brick liner. Each one of these brick has a wax coating, because at the end of the day, when these walls are tilted up, that brick liner needs to come off. And so the wax helps that brick liner be able to be peeled from the wall. So again, this is probably the second phase, right? You have the rat slab getting ready. The second phase is to snap in the brick liner and then snap in the thin brick behind it. And you can see on this particular wall here, the number of openings that will be left once this wall is stood up. I would imagine these are windows here for this side of the facility. So Tyson, if you don't mind, let's move on to the next phase.
It's really cool the way they have this set up. You kind of walked me through it real quick. They've got all these walls kind of set in stages, so we can literally walk stage to stage and show you what's the next stage we're walking to.
The next stage we're going to go to is we'll show the what's called the architectural pour. So as I mentioned, 107 slabs. Each slab has 2 pours. One is the architectural pour that will create the grout joints in the thin brick, be prepared for the insulation to be put on it. And then, of course, the last pour is called the structural pour. And as you said, Tyson, we'll walk over to another section of walls that has already had the architectural pour done. So the viewer can get an appreciation for what it looks like after that first architectural pour.
All right, so now we're sitting here at basically phase 2 of the process it takes to put up these walls.
Yeah, actually phase 3. Remember, first phase is the rat slab, second phase is the brick liner and snapping the thin brick in, and then the This phase is
Gotcha.
what's called the architectural pour. So the cement is poured, the grout is done, it forms your grout lines for your thin brick, and then as you can see, we have put on the foam insulation panels that is secured into the concrete by these pins. So this would be essentially I would say the third piece of this project. So you get a good indication. Here's kind of shows a viewer the thickness of that foam. This creates all your insulation for these walls. And again, this now is prepared for the next stage, which is placing the rebar, placing what they call embeds on there, and then preparing that for what the last pour called the structural pour. So let's walk over to the structural pour. Okay, Tyson, so now we're here to another phase of the project, and this is a good example of how these walls have been now prepared and are ready for the structural pour. And you can see as you look inside here, you can see the rebar, you can see the embeds that have been placed in there, some of those square pieces that are probably more visible on that slab over there. Again, this is the structural component of the tilt-up panel, getting ready for the structural pour. And once that structural pour occurs, then these walls are ready for tilt-up process. And so if we just walk right over here, we can see the finished product of a wall that already has the structural pour done. So it is different, probably wetness of the cement. I know on the architectural piece it had to be a little bit more water in the mix, so we make sure that it forms the grout lines appropriately. And then I would imagine in a structural pour probably not as wet, but right here you can see the actual structural pour here that is complete. This wall here is ready for tilt-up. So matter of fact, all these walls are. And right here, this is an interesting part of the project because this slab here, we talked about having rat slabs specifically for the walls. This slab here is going to be permanent. This is the floor of the conference center. So we're looking at from here to the end. This is conference space. Over there is where the loading dock is. And right there, Tyson, if you can see those gentlemen getting ready here, they're going to start probably in the next day, they're going to pour the actual floor for the locker room space. So when you look at this conference space, the locker room space, all the way, I guess that would be kind of north of this facility, it is really going to be what's called the back of the house. And so we're very hopeful that once we get that slab on grade poured, they're going to start the tilt-up panel process from that end and go around and tilt up walls and have all the back of the house ready for enclosure. And then the steel erectors will come in right behind, start laying the steel trusses. And we're very hopeful to get this back of the house covered before weather hits, so we'll be able to work on this project through the winter.
Okay, so you were saying like rat slabs typically are temporary, but some of these are permanent.
Yeah, on the back of the house here, they did a really good job to make sure that, where they're going to pour a slab, and this one is going to be the floor of the conference center. Just like, that is going to be the floor of the locker rooms. And of course, when you look at the loading dock area, those slabs are going to be the floor of the loading dock. So yeah, so they're very efficient in the process. When they could put a permanent slab down, they did.
Okay, very cool. So, and we mentioned a little bit at the beginning, make sure we're in frame. Mentioned a little bit at the beginning, we had a little bit of a freak snow drop earlier in the week, probably sooner than you were anticipating. How did that factor into your schedule?
Well, it impacted the schedule a little bit. I know I'm very pleased to hear that our concrete guys are going to be able to pour on a Saturday, which is incredible to be able to do that. And so we'll catch up a little bit. So the biggest thing that impacted the schedule of this was the brick order. We got a little bit behind there. But what's happening now is we thought that we'd be able to start tilting up on the 18th of October. It looks like now that might be pushed to the 20th. But so lost a couple days from weather, but not too bad. And I do think the guys have done a great job of catching up when they can. So the key is to get some of these walls tilted up and especially around the back of the house, so the concrete guys can be ahead of the steel erectors. And once they get these back of the house walls tilted up, they will be, and then it'll be. And so the good thing about the schedule is they found a way for the steel erector and the tilt-up panel concrete people to work together.
Work in sync of each other.
Work in sync. You know, ideally you'd like to have all these walls poured and then have them all tilted up, and then you bring your steel erector in. And then, but because we got a little bit behind, they thought it was important to have the steel erector and the tilt-up panel process work simultaneously. And it looks like they're going to be able to do it. But the important thing is to get the back of the house walls tilted up first to make sure that can happen. And right now, steel erection is supposed to start on the 25th of October.
I'm imagining that for so many different teams to be able to work in sync like that, you probably have regular meetings.
Well, we have a lot of meetings for sure. I mean, every 2 weeks we have what's called an OAC meeting, owner, architect, contractor, and we go through things that are outstanding. So as you would imagine, a project this big, there are a lot of requests for information, RFIs that are sent by the various subcontractors to the contractor, to the architect, to get some answers as they move forward. And then, of course, we do have some sequencing meetings scheduled that are usually every 2 weeks too, to make sure that they can. And the contractor, Bateman Hall Hogan, they've done a wonderful job of making sure that everybody's in sequence and making sure everybody's aware of the schedule. Because as you can imagine, if one subcontractor gets behind a week, it impacts the other subcontractor. So you have these coordination meetings that are probably going to happen more often now that these walls are going up.
That's very cool. And so it sounds like with the whole schedule and the whole process, there's some I guess I want to say flexibility. Like there's things that are going to happen that slows you down, and then lucky breaks will come that'll help you get back on track. So you kind of are going back and forth in the timeline.
Well, a lot of coordination, and given a year like we have with supply chain issues, it's just, again, I can't credit Bateman Hall Hogan enough on how they've been able to orchestrate this and coordinate it. But there's always going to be things that are outside of our control. But at the end of the day, things are moving finally. And again, like you said at the beginning of this, I'm excited for next week when we can start showing some walls tilted up. So as you can see here, we're right along I-15. And what I think when you look at, I have said you're going to be going to work one day next week and you're going to not see any walls up, and on your way home you're going to see 10 or 15 walls tilted up. So that's going to be a real exciting day.
Okay, so you may have already mentioned it before, but you have to remind when you expect to see the walls starting to come up here within 2 weeks, or?
One thing I didn't mention is when you do that final structural pour, you at least have to have a 6 or 7 day cure time to make sure the concrete's strong enough to be tilted up. And so depending on those tests when they come in, will determine when we can start tilting up those walls. Now the walls we're looking at right here have been poured for quite some time, so they're really ready to be tilted up. But it was really key where you can see the blankets over those structural pours that happened on Wednesday of this week. It's important to get those cured and the concrete strong enough, because we'd like to start the tilt up process from that side and come around. And
curing is just time to let it set.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay, and we talked a little bit about it before we started videoing this thing. We expect to have maybe another month or 2 or 3 before, probably 2 months before the winter, the snow starts to dump in and make it a little bit harder to do certain things. What is it that you're hoping to achieve by that point so that you can continue to work on a certain level throughout the winter?
Well, that's the one thing, unfortunately, nobody can control, right, is the weather. But I do think there's a good plan in place. And like I mentioned, this tilt-up process is going to start on the back end. The back end, again, is the conference space, the locker room space, the loading dock, the office area. So it's really critical that we really focus on getting those walls tilted up, getting the steel erection on the back of the house piece, get the sheeting on so that we can cover it in and begin working on the inside. Because there's a considerable amount of work that can happen over the winter inside, because again, that's where your locker rooms are, where your office space is.
Once you have an inside.
Once we have an inside. So I think we're going to be fine there. And then, of course, weather will determine how much we get done in the ballpark, where the actual hockey rink is going to be in the inside of the facility.
Okay. So all things considered, we're still very realistically on track to see this thing open in October next year.
Well, it's tough to give a date. I mean, we're hopeful. I mean, we've lost some time here. I think we can make up the time, but you know, what I'll tell you is if we have a good winter now, I'll be the first one to say we need some significant snow in this area for our country up in Idaho. But if we have a winter that can hold off until maybe the middle of January, I think we'll make up a lot of ground. And then I think, you know, the spring and the early part of the summer, we can make up some significant work time. And, you know, we're hopeful that we can open it up and still meet our, you know, we're planning on it right now, being able to open this as anticipated, and that's the end of October 2022.
Excellent. Well, is there anything else that we haven't covered or anything that you'd like to show me while we're out here?
I don't think so, Tyson. I think we've done a pretty good job, and you know, hopefully the viewer gets an appreciation for the process of these structural walls. You know, it's one type of construction process that where you're doing all your wall formation on the ground, and then you start tilting them up. So it's really going to be neat to see the hard work that's been done up to this point and getting some walls put in place.
Is that given the projects that you've done in the past, is that a typical process? Is that typically how they build the walls?
Well, things that I've been involved in is totally different. You know, it's usually you have a process where you throw up your structural steel and then you put your CMU block up and then you brick the outside of that. But in this particular case, again, everything's been done on the ground.
It seems to be working. So this is going to be one of the first walls that we see going vertical.
It should be. Well, this section for sure. Now, again, ideally, I know they want to start on that end and work around this way, but we'll see how that concrete over there cures. But I do think we're going to see some good activity next week.
Well, I'm as excited about that as you are, or I don't know if I can be excited as you are. You've talked a lot about, particularly, your excitement in seeing the walls come up.
Well, it's been a long time coming for the community. You know, they've waited a long time to have an event center, and you know what I can tell them now, it's happening. I mean, we will start to see some real significant progress here in the next week or two. I mean, not saying there hasn't been any, because as you've seen today, there's been all kinds of work done up to this point.
You almost got to be on the ground to see it, though.
Yeah, now it's going to be visible to, you know, people that are driving by. So.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad that we took the time to actually come out here on site and take a look at what's been going on for an episode 3 of the Auditorium District. I imagine that we'll do this again.
Yeah,
maybe every 2 or 3 episodes, or as we see fit.
Yeah, I think so. I think it'll be nice for us to be able to see, when we, you know, allow the viewer to see it like we do, close up and personal, and see the various stages of the process, and get inside the facility and, you know, start to see how this thing evolves.
Excellent. For everybody who's watching this on our YouTube channel, Construction Business TV, I'm going to leave a link right in that corner where it'll take you to the playlist where you can see all the episodes of the Auditorium series on CBTV Idaho. This is episode 3. We're going to do an episode. We've been doing an episode every month. We're going to continue to do an episode every month up until the finishing of the event center, which so far is still slated for completion around October of 2022. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to sit and watch. You can watch the previous episodes and see what we've been talking about, and you can continue to subscribe to the channel so that you can get updated when we come back next month and let you know what the progress of this event center is looking like at that point.